Okay, I'm good.
Can't.
You can't. Can't? Oh, there, give it a go.
All right. There we go.
Okay. All right, everybody, this is Wintermute and Jinx. I'm coming to you from the Think Tank. He's coming to you from Fortress Jinx up in
Canada.
the wasteland that is Canada. Um, we there's an ongoing joke about that, so
Yeah,
it
that's
makes
fair.
sense to us. Okay,
I'm getting a few of my viewers are saying like, "You're always in a sweater. Why are you always so cold?" It's like, well,
have you been to Canada?
yeah,
And you're not just in Canada, you're in Canada.
yeah, yeah.
Like
That's right.
like
Yeah,
really,
up
really
there.
Canada,
Yeah, yeah,
Canadian
yeah,
Canada,
yeah.
Canada.
That's yeah.
Um, okay, so what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the pros and cons of posting your rules online as a board game designer or a game designer in general. And then I also want to talk about, as part of that, the pros and cons of things like Tabletop Simulator, because I know there's some
Mm,
strong opinions on that sort of thing. So
mm.
first though, first though, I want to talk about posting your rules online as a board game
Yeah,
designer.
love to hear it. Yeah.
Um, what are your feelings on that, Jix?
Well, I think everybody should do it. I think that's the plain and simple way of it. I think everybody should. And in fact, I don't know too many people that don't do it. Now, what are your thoughts? Like, do you know many board game designers that don't put up their rules on the internet to free and accessible to everybody? Because I can't think of any.
Games Workshop.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Not only does Games Workshop hate the idea of giving you their
Mm.
rules, they expect you to pay $80 for their core rule
Oh
book,
wow. Wow.
and then 50, what is it now, $40 for the codex for whatever army you choose to play.
Hmm.
And God forbid you choose to play more than one army. And then God forbid that there's supplementals that come out that are going to cost
Oh
you 20
man.
bucks a 20
Yeah.
bucks a pop. My hatred for Games Workshop is growing
Oh
day
yeah.
by day because there's
Yeah.
more and more news coming out about how they handle their business.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But that's a whole different topic.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
thought Global War 36 was expensive to get into, but Games Workshop, you pay like, what is it, $2 on average for the miniature or something like that? I don't know. It's crazy. Or $1 on average. I don't even know, but it's huge, right? The amount of money
yeah,
people
yeah,
spend on that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Really, when you think about it, global war is not as bad as it first looks,
No, no.
and I will say that without hesitation.
Hmm.
Yes, if you are the person who's going to be buying most of the supplies and the game for your gaming group,
Hmm.
you don't have to go with the biggest map. You can go with the
Hmm.
smaller
Yeah,
map.
totally.
And you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
use army markers. You're going to port over what you probably already have from Axis, whatever Axis and Allies you
Yep,
use.
yep, yep,
There are other World War II 172nd kind of board games that you
yep.
may
That's
already
right.
own that you can port over some of the pieces for.
Hmm.
I own Fortress America.
Hmm.
Those pieces would totally work in some sort of
Yeah,
sci-fi
yeah.
version,
And
if
usually,
you
if
wanted to
you
use them.
don't jump straight into Global War 36, you usually go into like Axis and Allies first, and so already you have all the foundation of what you need to get into Global War 36. But Games Workshop is different.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, Games Workshop expects you to drop, I mean, hundreds and hundreds and
Mm,
hundreds and hundreds of dollars right off the bat.
mm, mm, mm.
And you don't really have a choice but to do that to
Yeah,
play the game.
yeah, yeah. Totally.
Um, yeah, it's um, there's a, and I'll post a link to her channel. There's Discourse Miniatures. She has a YouTube channel, and she talks a lot about the problems of Games Workshop and their business model and their business practices,
Mm, mm,
which are very, very morally questionable.
mm.
And I will post a link because I brought her up, and I think it's a good channel to kind of get an idea of how Games Workshop
Right,
works.
right.
She still plays. She actually does play the game still.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
So she's not just bitching at Games Workshop.
yeah.
She actually has a vested interest, and thus is willing to explain the problems and
Mm,
also pat them on the back as needed.
mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want this to be a whole video of bashing Games Workshop,
Right, yeah.
but when it comes to accessibility, Games Workshop is a pretty shining example of this paywall. They're
Hmm.
behind a paywall.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
Global War looks like it's kind of behind a big paywall at first, but really it's not as bad as
It's
it
not, no,
seems.
no. Biggest
Yeah,
expense is, well, no, maybe not biggest expense, but once you get the map, you could do a
yeah,
lot of other stuff just after you
sure.
get the map,
And I
right?
have videos on my channel where I explained how I
Hmm.
cheaply
Yeah, yeah. I've seen them.
made homemade tokens to kind of fill in the gaps until I had was able to get the spending money to buy other pieces. Now, and I'm probably going to redo that video with kind of an updated version in a couple weeks or months. But so back to the core rules thing, though. Even major game companies have started just posting their rule books online in PDF format.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like Global War did. And I wish this had been a thing sooner as I got into board gaming.
Yeah.
Because I have absolutely bought board games that the back of the box says one thing, the description of the game says one thing, and the theme of the game is something that intrigues you, and you look at it and it goes, hey, this seems like a really cool game. And you get home, you open it, you play it, and you're like, this is nothing what they said it was. And I hate board games, and I'm talking more board games in general, where it's an abstract game.
Yeah.
Where it's just about the mechanics and manipulating the mechanics to achieve a certain whatever, scoring more points than the opponent. And I've played some of these games that are fun, but then at the same time, when they say, okay, here's this abstract game, but we're going to give it the theme of being a leader in the Persian Empire.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
At the height of its power. And then you play the game and it's like, okay, this is nothing like running the Persian Empire.
Yeah, yeah.
This is nothing like building the seven wonders of the world.
Yeah.
This is nothing like being a general during World War II. This is an abstract game that could have any theme thrown on it at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
You could have just said, you could have just had blank white pieces of different sizes. But instead you wanted to throw a certain historical theme onto it. And I hate games I hate it when games do that. If you're an abstract game, you should say you're an abstract game. Don't try to make yourself sound like you're a fantasy warfare game when really, no, this is just about mechanics and moving blocks around. It doesn't represent combat in any way, shape, or form. The worst example of this is probably chess. I hate it when people say, oh yeah, chess is supposed to represent combat. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Have you ever watched a single historical documentary about war?
Yeah.
Please don't be that obtuse. Okay. Chess is an abstract game. It has a light theme thrown on it of political intrigue.
Sure.
Or so what some people say medieval warfare or whatever. That's not it at all.
No.
That's nothing to do with chess. They are literally just shapes and then you associate how that shape operates based on the way it's shaped. Okay. The way that it's actually sculpted is irrelevant.
People are judging, they're judging the visual image of chess by the theme, right? It's just the visual image, that's all it is. Well, the only way it's warfare is that the fact that you're sitting opposite your combatant and battling something out, but it's not war in any sense of the word, I think, as far as I can gather. Yeah.
So that bugs me. And that, because that's a thing, I want to see the rules before I buy this game, or I want to play it within my group. Now, I'm fortunate in that my local group has a guy who the guy who runs it actually is a volunteer worker for Yellow Games.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So not only does he have access to their library, basically sitting in his basement at any given time, he has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of board games sitting in his basement at any given time.
Right.
And you can show up every week, every other week, and he will have 2 new games you've never played before set up. And and that's great. So I can actually play them. And they said, hey, and I have a list of games that I want to eventually buy and own because I played them. They're good games, but I don't have a regular, when my kids get older, maybe they'll be interested. Yeah. But there are other games that I've bought where I'm just like, man, I wish I knew how the rules for this worked. A great example is the game Zombies. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen this one. I don't know if it's as popular now as it was, but it came in this little kind of rectangular box.
I remember,
and it invokes all those images of a zombie apocalypse and fast, quick rules to try and survive and get out there. And it's really just not a good game.
Nah.
It's not a good game at all. And I bought it because it wasn't expensive, and I regret buying it, to be honest. It's still sitting there doing nothing in my closet because it's a terrible game.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So give me the chance to read it. And to be quite honest, it's better for the company to allow a potential player to read the rules and say,
Mm-hmm.
not my thing,
Mm-hmm.
rather than get that $40 and have that player give it a shit review.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true.
That I think is the big thing that people
Yeah.
miss.
Yeah.
And the big, it's better to you don't want somebody to become resentful that they spent money on your product,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because that resent turns into bitterness, and then they're going to badmouth your product to anybody who gets the chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
And
true.
I've done that with Zombies. And again, a prime example, Zombies. Oh, that's a terrible game. Don't waste your money
Mm-hmm.
on it. Really, it looks fun. I know it looks fun, but it is shit. Um, so in that sense, it's always, in my opinion, better to just put your rules out there. Just put it out there, let people read it. Don't let them waste their money and get embittered with you, and
Mm-hmm.
really feel like, you misrepresented this game, and I'm going to call you out on it on my YouTube channel now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Well, yeah.
that's, yeah.
It's an old mindset. Okay, but there's a few things I want to say. Is like, so YouTube is fairly new. Leaving reviews is fairly new. Beforehand, when they posted a game, so we live in the information age, but board games before didn't have. You had a pamphlet essentially saying this is what this board game is about, and like you said, it's never really accurate, or not always accurate. But what I'm trying to get at is there was a paywall, but there was also, I don't know what you call it, a like wall, a preference wall, or whatever you want to call it. Is like people, the market was fairly closed because people didn't want to take the risk. So you really had to be into war games to buy one and to test it out, right? And so the likelihood of you liking it was higher. And so by not making it accessible, you limit the market, but the people that you do eventually get, who actually get across the paywall, across the, whatever you want to call it, that risk of not liking it, they end up liking it more times than not, I suppose, because it's an expensive $80 game or whatever, and now they've crossed that line, and of course they're going to play it. And likewise too, like the more pricey the game is, the more complex it is. They're only going to get one or two games, maybe 4 or 5 games on that, unless they find a really passionate group about it. And so at the end of the day, they'll be like, well, I didn't really like it, but I didn't play it enough, so I'm not going to leave a comment or a review on the subject, right? So I could see why it worked out the way it did. But I do definitely agree with you that it's good if they expose it out there, because people know what they're buying. People have more leisure money to spend, and they're stepping into things more willing and aware. I would also raise another point that by making it accessible to the community and having kind of a community place where they could feedback, even just by reading the rules, you could improve your game exponentially.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
that's a huge
and
thing.
and I respect that historical board gaming puts rules up online
I
for
agree.
games that aren't even out yet,
I agree.
because they
Yeah.
want to get some feedback about what players
Mm-hmm.
are. If you see an obvious problem in the rules, say something.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
may,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the times they'll and I've done this with some typos or some sentences that were superfluous, or
Mm-hmm.
you could tell that they intended to delete this sentence at some point, but it just got skipped over in
Yeah.
the editing
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Trust me, that is really, really easy.
Yeah.
As somebody who used to write reports on a daily basis,
Yeah.
it is really easy to miss stuff in proofreading.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing you know, you've got the city attorney sending you emails going, did you mean to delete this third sentence in this paragraph? Because this is confused. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah, that totally happens.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. So that's another reason to get
Mm-hmm.
your rules out there, even ahead of the game, even ahead of the release of the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It
Well,
also gives players.
even in production, like with Kickstarter as well. Like I love some of these Kickstarter games that are coming out. It's like you read all about it, you've watched whatever all about it. Like it's not even on people's shelves, and you're already feeding back. Now, Paradox games, which some of our viewers might enjoy. There's like Hearts of Iron, which is a World War II video game and such. I've played it quite a bit too. But the way Paradox operates is they put development diaries each week on what's happening. And they're actually very responsive to the feedback. People say, oh, you took out this feature that I really enjoyed in the previous iteration of the game. And then Paradox is like, people really cared about that. Okay, let's put it back in. And that's really cool. I love the fact that they're open and really exposed to people what they do. And I think it breeds a better community. It breeds a better game.
Yeah.
And people enjoy it more, right? So
Yeah,
I think it's cool.
Fraxis Games does the same thing with their Civilization series.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they will say, yeah, the support for the, people were screaming in the message boards that they wanted to see this civilization represented, or
Mm.
please bring back this mechanic from Civ
Yeah.
5 or Civ 4, whatever it is. It really missed this mechanic. And they said, you know
Mm-hmm.
what? You're right. You're right. We
Mm.
agree with you. And
Yeah.
here it is in this
Yeah.
update. And they'll do
Sure.
videos about
Sure.
that. And I don't have the time to play Civ as much as I used to. But I still stay up to date on what's going on with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I am part of that community,
Mm.
even if I don't have the time to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
As
Sure.
soon as Civ 7 hits, I know I'm going to buy it and play it for as little time as I can manage, but I'm still going to play it.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But yeah, so yes, updating the rules, proofreading, seeing obvious problems that need clarification ahead of time. All that is a reason to put out your rules ahead of time. Excuse me. So yeah, and pretty much at this point, almost all the game companies I know of, you're right, are doing that. You can look up most rules online right off the bat.
Yeah, totally.
They are taking this opportunity to advertise their game, to build excitement about it, and so on and so forth. So I think we're both easily in the camp of, yeah, this is the way it should be. This is the way it should be. It's better for the industry. It's better for the companies. It's better for the players and the fan base for the respective games, even if they're not just board games, video games. Most multimedia projects at this point are probably should make it a point to listen to people when there's feedback.
Yeah,
and not just not just stay up in their ivory tower, complaining at all, demeaning all the peasants who don't understand how smart they are.
That's right. Yeah. I would say it's not. So companies don't think it's always advantageous to give it out for free, because what are the reasons? Let's say you could, first of all, there's the issue of people stealing your ideas. Next off could be, well, you put a lot of work into it. Got artists and designers and real, you hired people to proofread things and whatever else, and you're just going to give it away for free. It seems to be counterintuitive sometimes, right? To just give stuff away for free. But I think it's just what you got to do, right? Like you go to, your fast food place, you get it in a packaging, and you got to it's part of the packaging that comes with the game at this point.
I think it's fair. Yeah. And the whole stealing of ideas and things like that, that probably deserves its whole own video. But it is worth mentioning here, real quick. At least a point is worth mentioning is there's nothing you can do about that.
No,
there's nothing you can do about that. Now I know every country's a little different with their copyright laws and intellectual property laws, but I do know, as of the last time I looked this up, in the United States and probably most of the westernized countries, game mechanics cannot be copyrighted. Okay, it's as simple as that. They cannot be copyrighted, and thus, and I use this example with Pandemic is a infamous, just absolutely famous, one of the most famous board games out there at this point. Non-board gamers might know Pandemic at this point. But I remember I was there when it came out and became a hit. And within 6 months, there were games hitting the market that were Pandemic clones. They were basically taking the card-driven randomness of where things are spawning and flipping over certain events, sometimes cooperative, sometimes not. And they were basically cloning that mechanic into their game. And there's nothing Z-Man Games can do about it.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. You cannot copyright the mechanic. You can copyright intellectual property. That's a different issue. That's a different matter. But game mechanics cannot be copyrighted. So as soon as you put an idea out there, the success of that idea just shows it was a good idea when it comes to game mechanics. And even the another one that was just started being cloned all over the place was the drop tower. I don't know if you've seen that. It's not as common, but you pick up certain color chip or cubes, drop them into the tower. It bounces around with some other cubes, and then a random assortment of colors drop out, and then that activates certain events based on what kind of color comes out and the combinations and whatnot. That started to be as soon as that came out. Within 6 months, there are other board games that were probably in development, close to being finished, and they saw that and went, "Oh my God, that solves so many problems for our game. We need to take that idea and use it." And that's it. That's just the way it works. And so that's why I know when I do a video about a house rule, if I put it out there and HBG wants to take that and incorporate it into the core rules, there's nothing I can do about it.
No.
Now, that I'm not necessarily bitter about that. The only thing I ask for the most part is recognition that I was a contributor.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Now I know.
Which is easy to do, right? Like you just simply go on one page of the manual or whatever, and if it's online and free, then it doesn't really matter, right?
Mhm,
One page of the
mhm.
manual, winter mute, whatever, right?
Yeah,
Done.
yeah.
Or we
And
thank the
so
contributors winter mute for XYZ. Like it's pretty easy stuff, right? So,
mhm, mhm.
yeah.
So I understand the reactive,
Hmm.
reflexive desire. I almost said paranoia, but that's really not. That's too strong a term.
Yeah.
But that reflective desire to protect
Mhm.
what and get credit for what you
Yeah,
did.
that's right. Yeah.
That's reasonable. That is
Mhm.
completely reasonable. But you just have to realize the reality of the market that you're dealing in and the
Mhm.
way it works and the reality of once you put an idea out there, and even tech companies deal with this all the time.
Mhm.
The idea of a cell phone, you create a
Mhm.
cell phone, you put it out in the market. Well, your a rival company comes up with the very
Mhm.
next cell phone,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then this guy says you copied that idea. Well, routinely they're like, no, no, you can't copyright the idea of a cell
Mhm.
phone.
Yeah.
Okay, you can copyright proprietary technology. You can copyright the exact design of your telephone. You
Mhm.
can copyright brand new technology, and there's somebody who
Yeah.
can probably describe this better than me, but you can copyright certain aspects of your cell phone and but we're not going. You can't copyright the idea of a cell phone.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes.
That's difficult.
Yeah.
And in reality, and another good example of that is probably everyone watching this knows who Arthur C. Clarke is.
Yep.
Okay, quick trivia question: who was the very first person in history to put out the idea of in any sort of major way the idea of a satellite?
I don't know. Let's say Jules Verne, one of the earliest science
Arthur
fiction
C.
writers. No,
Clarke.
Arthur C. Clarke.
Arthur
Okay.
C. Clarke.
Okay.
He was the one who now he may not be the very first person to have come up with this
Right.
idea, but he was the first person who publicly
Oh yeah.
put it
Okay.
into his books
Yeah, I
and
see.
made people kind of go, yeah, that might work, and actually made tech companies and researchers kind of go, that's probably doable
Oh yeah.
because
Okay.
Arthur C. Clarke was actually a scientist. He was
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
actually a scientist before he became a science fiction writer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so later on in life, somebody asked him, it's like, well, did you ever think about maybe going after a patent idea for the idea of a site? He goes no, and the main reason I don't want to is because one, I don't want to stymie at all technological advancement. I
Mm-hmm.
don't.
Mm-hmm.
Two, I'm already kind of wealthy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I
Yeah.
don't need the money.
Sure. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in respect to and to honor Arthur C. Clarke, the zone in which satellites orbit around the Earth, because there's actually a set zone that they have to stay in per like international regulations and
Yeah.
what, is actually called the Clarke sphere.
Oh, cool. Nice. That's neat.
But there's an idea. There's this kind of it's in some ways it's I like to tell that story
Mm-hmm.
personally. I find that a very, very cool
Yeah. No,
story.
that's neat.
But
Neat.
it's he could have, in theory, put out a patent on this
Sure.
design.
Sure.
Now, does that mean everybody who comes up with a satellite he can sue for money? Not necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
That may not have held up. Now, his design may have held up. And dude, you're just copying his design.
Mm-hmm.
You need to pay him money. That's a little
Mm-hmm.
different. And that's really what
Mm-hmm.
patents are for. But in a lot of ways, once the idea is out there, the idea is out there. It's just
Yeah.
out there. You just have to deal with that. It's never going back. It's
Mm-hmm.
you can't control it. You can't put it back in the genie. We don't like monopolies. We don't want monopolies. And that's part of the reason why patent laws are very, very strict. And
Mm-hmm.
even copyright laws are generally somewhat strict about
Mm-hmm.
IP and what counts as IP and what doesn't count as IP. And if you want to learn about that, look up Games Workshop and the way they tried to copyright the term Space Marine.
Oh yeah. Okay.
It's bonkers,
Yeah. Okay.
bonkers, the things that they tried to do. But again, that's a different video.
Well, it shows up
So
everywhere now, Space Marine. If you have a, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Even though that term predates them even existing as a
Oh, I'm
company,
sure.
they tried
I'm
to
sure.
copyright it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So anything else you want to add on that topic about the idea and the marketplace of ideas and things like that?
Well, I think patents need to be like people. inventors need to be protected for their ideas that they come up with. I think that's very clear, because without that, if anybody could steal it, and it's like the biggest fish just always eats these little creative little endeavors, then nothing will really get done. You will lose out a lot of the inventors that could potentially come up with good ideas. So there needs to be some protection of their rights, or at least a respecting of what they accomplished and did. So yeah, I'm just saying, like, sure, you can't patent an idea, a board game idea, but at the same token, there needs to be some appreciation for people's contributions to this kind of stuff, right? So whether that comes from Axis and Allies Classic with Larry Harris, like, people should always not make a nod to this guy and say, you know, his grandfather, this kind of thing. I know he's not technically, but, you know, I mean, he might be, but I know there's other games that predated his stuff that were of a similar vein. But yeah, there should be some always recognition of the giants on whose shoulders we stand upon.
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah. So,
okay, so that brings us to the next point we wanted to talk about, which is the tabletop simulator and the like.
mm-hmm. Yeah, tabletop.
What is your initial
simulator.
response when you hear somebody criticizing tabletop simulator? Right? How do you react to that? What is your opinion?
Well, I'm always surprised. I'm always surprised that people criticize it, because I think every single game. No, not every single game. My friends routinely say, try this game out with me. I really want to play this game with somebody. I can't find somebody, especially during COVID. So they load up a game, and it's like, man, I actually really like this game. And, you know, I've bought games I've played just on Tabletop Simulator and never played it in the physical form. I bought them, I love them, I put them on my shelf, and I want to play them, but I've never managed to actually physically play it except on Tabletop Simulator. There's the other aspect of playtesting things on Tabletop Simulators. Like, well, I've read some reviews on this one. I don't know if it's quite for me because I'm more of a miniature guy or whatever. And then you jump on Tabletop Simulator. It's actually a really good concept of a game design. And again, you know, I've bought into games on Tabletop Simulator that I probably will never play in person. It's just fantastic, right? So I think it's great because you can play test it for yourself. The company will have a whole bunch of playtesters as well, too. It's very accessible to everybody. It's like a print and play, essentially. The company gets all this playtesting done and a lot of stuff figured out. And I think that's just all good all around. So that's why I'm generally surprised if game designers don't like their stuff on Tabletop Simulator.
Mm-hmm. And I do know Tabletop Simulator has the option. There are premium games on Tabletop Simulator,
you can
which
buy
are
them,
put out by the company that owns the rights to that game.
That's right.
And basically, it's and my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, is once that happens, you're really not supposed to post any pirated copies of the game anymore.
Gotcha.
Now that said, whatever. And pirated is the wrong word. You're not supposed to clone copies. You're not supposed to post any more cloned copies or mods of that game. Now, I will say this: the ones that are premium are probably way better than whatever the mod is.
For the most part,
I've met some amazing modders who just walk me through some stuff I had I'm like, oh man, I wish I knew how to do that from the beginning using Tabletop Simulator. But you know, it's. And that's fair. And I think that's fair. It's like, you know, this is another platform on which we can get our game out there. The one thing that always bugs me about the criticism of Tabletop Simulator is that everybody automatically assumes anybody who's playing it is a bad person.
Yeah.
It's like you're going back to the days of you know, LimeWire and the person-to-person sharing and things like that, which I still argue the validity of whether or not that was actually copyright, because I can loan you anything I want. Personally, I can loan Jinx anything I want, whether or not it's, you know, they have no say in that. If I want to burn a copy for you and give it to you, that's still legal.
Yeah, you just can't sell
P2P just immediately raised a lot of ire, and that's why they were all shut down. And legally, I don't think there was a lot of bad legal arguments going around about that one and a lot of precedent. And I think it was finally shut down. Most of that went away just because people got sick of having to put up with it. More than anything, whether or not it was illegal or illegal. But on the other hand, you know, another example is, what is it? Booty Bay, I think, is another like pirate website. I've gone there and I've downloaded things. Like I've downloaded, when I played Warhammer 40K, I downloaded the copy of the rulebook. Why? Because I already owned a hard copy.
Sure.
So I just I didn't want to have to sit there and scan all the pages I wanted to make for quick rules reference sheets. No, I just downloaded a digital copy from Booty Bay and just printed them off. I did nothing wrong. All I did
Mm.
was take a copy of something I already own and
Yeah.
paid for. And
Yeah.
so
That's right. Yeah.
I'm not a bad person for using
No.
Booty Bay or what
Yeah.
Pirate Bay or whatever the hell it was called. I
Yeah.
don't think it's around anymore.
Probably not.
And in that for that same reason, if somebody, well, oh, Tabletop Simulator, you're just ripping off that company. Really? Have you seen my table? Have you seen my
Mhm.
game closet? I've
Yeah.
never played a game on there that I didn't own.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
now there are a couple games that I might play with other people if I wanted to try them out.
Mhm.
So there's that. The other problem is most people who are playing that I know who are playing on Tabletop Simulator would rather play in person.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
that's the big thing people are missing about this is, my play group, uh, 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 I got a guy who lives in Maryland and another guy who lives in South Florida as part of my
Right.
core group.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another guy lived in Utah, for a while when he was playing with us. I mean, how are we going to ever meet up to play this game?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So Tabletop Simulator is the next best thing, even though we would rather meet in person
Mhm.
and play. It's just not an option for us,
Mhm. Mhm.
especially with something like COVID. Well, it's still better to play the game at all, to play any
Yeah.
game at all, than to not play a game at all,
Oh yeah. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because it keeps people excited and
Yeah.
fresh
Yeah.
and looking forward to the idea of finally getting to sit around a
Mhm.
table and actually
Mhm.
play with people who they want to play with.
Mhm. That's right. Yeah.
On the other hand, it especially with COVID, a lot of play groups just stopped.
Yeah.
They just
Mm.
stopped meeting. Well, what are you going to do? There are some pay to play premium sites out there that have a litany of board games. I can't remember the rest of them off the top of my head. And now some of them are the one that my game group tried for a little while. It wasn't that expensive at all, so it
Okay.
wasn't that big of a deal. And so long as one person bought it,
Yeah.
everybody they could still invite their friends to
Oh
play,
yeah.
just like a
Gotcha.
normal board game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there really wasn't any issue there.
Mm.
It just didn't hold up because, like me, I prefer to play with people in
Sure. Yeah.
person.
I think
I
everybody
do.
does. Yeah.
I put
Like.
up with Tabletop Simulator
Yeah.
because it's the next best thing, and it is a
Exactly.
good thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the last point of it still, and again, Discord Miniatures, she talks extensively about when it comes to cloning models and 3D printing models
Right.
and pirating and whatnot, and whether that hurts the miniature wargaming community in general. So I would point you to watching her videos to explain that much better in terms of it's not as clear cut a thing as you think, which is
Mm-hmm.
which is surprising.
Mm-hmm.
And this is from somebody who is generally, I'm a very I have a very Ayn Rand view
Sure. Yeah.
of intellectual property
Right. Right.
in terms of the rights of the creator,
Mm-hmm.
but there are limitations.
Yeah.
Okay. There are, if again, and this goes back to once the idea is out there, the idea is out there, whether you're the
Mm-hmm.
person who created it or not. There's a difference. Like in her book, where it's the architect was
Yeah.
being messed with, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Look, I'm the one creating this."
Yeah.
He took a drastic action. I didn't necessarily agree with that, but I understood the point of the book.
Mm-hmm.
My point being is somebody who's very staunch about protecting intellectual property on a personal core value level. I look at Tabletop Simulator and people who bitch about it and go, "You're missing the point.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
really are missing the point."
Yeah.
There's nothing about now. I will say this: if you are somebody who can go to your local game store every Friday and play with people these various games, and you choose to do it on Tabletop Simulator because it's free, I am going to look at you kind of
Yeah.
with a disapproving glare.
Sure.
Okay, that to me takes things to another level.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot more to it than that. But if you are being cheap just to be cheap, I don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
If you just don't have a lot of money, that's different. But if you're doing it out of spite because you just don't want to, because you feel you shouldn't have to pay for anything,
Yeah.
and I do know people like this.
Yeah.
I have a family member who refuses to pay. If a game is free, he will not drop a single penny on it. He will play League of Legends, and he played it 10 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and he will not drop a single penny on it. Why? Because it's free, and I will not pay for anything that should be free.
Yeah.
I've dropped a couple $100 on League of Legends.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
even phase me.
Yeah.
Why? Because
Yeah.
I want Riot to be successful. I want League of Legends to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
For as much joy and excitement as I've gotten out of that game, it's worth that for me
Yeah.
financially
Yeah.
to put the money out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I want to spend money on these board games that are out there, but I don't have a group right in front of me to play on a regular basis, most of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I've got a semi regular gaming group, but that's just now started meeting back up.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
tabletop simulator is a fantastic alternative
Yeah.
when you want to play games with
Yeah.
people.
I agree. I agree.
It builds excitement for the
Community.
game. It gets it
Mm-hmm.
out there. It
Yeah.
gets people who want to play it. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm a supporter of it as a concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
I've said enough.
Yeah. Well, you said a good few things on there too. I really like what you have to say, and I want to make a couple points here too. First of all, like I was into podcasts before podcasts were cool. I think
Oh,
they
you're
did one of those people, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, but like legitimately, they came out like a long time ago. There was what's his name now, Steve something or other. Anyways, so it was pretty early. It was science fiction, this kind of stuff, and it always struck me because I was a young kid at the time. There's always released on a Creative Commons non-distribution license or non-attribution license. Maybe that's what it was, and so. Basically, it said you could take it, you could listen to it, you could share it, but you couldn't change it or monetize on it. So I just started looking it up. It's like, and that's basically a thing that a lot of stuff is. If you're an artist and you put your stuff online, like you're not allowed to make any commercial use out of it. You have to attribute the original artist, but you're not allowed to make any commercial use out of it. It has to basically, yeah, it's free for people to use on the internet and borrow, but you can't make any money off of it. So. Yeah, so that's interesting to do. So, and likewise, I have all these books up here. If I take and photocopy a few pages of them and give them to you, Intermute, well, I'm allowed to do that because I'm not selling it to you or anything like that.
That's fair use.
Yeah, fair use agreement. Yeah, exactly. So likewise with board game stuff and maybe even board game rules that you design, maybe it should work something along those attitudes as well. Now, I'm not sure how that works. Like, for instance, if I'm an artist and put something up on the internet, do I automatically have it copyrighted by, like, the American law or the Canadian law, or does it work a little bit differently where I have to apply for a license and this kind of stuff? I'm not too sure. I really don't know too much about that. And so that's my one point, and it's more of a question rather than anything else. Another bit was about Tabletop Simulator itself and about the experience you get out of it. Like, if I used to do a ton of backpacking in Europe when I was younger, I've been, almost every continent in the world and loved it. My parents were Cold War era refugees from Central Europe, and they come over and they're like, well, you don't need to travel, and why just watch it on TV? You could see everything from the comfort of your living room. You don't need to go there. It's like, it's not the same thing. And board games are exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
You have in your peripheral vision, you see the board game. You have the miniatures to be tactile. Like, if you're on Tabletop Simulator with a screen, I don't think people get this. If you're on Tabletop Simulator, it's not a very fun experience, to be honest. It's the game that makes it fun, but Tabletop itself is kind of,
For a game of this scale, it actually took me quite a while to get used because I can look at my map right now and take it in very quickly.
Yeah.
I can do a quick scan and understand there's
That's right, yeah.
Tabletop Simulator, you have to zoom into a point where only you're looking at maybe 1/6, 1/8 of the map at any given time at best. So usually you're zoomed in even more.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to forget what's going on elsewhere.
That's right, yeah.
You have to keep a mental image of, oh, that's right, don't forget to move those units all the way down on South Africa. And the Commonwealth is particularly hard to play because of this. In this format, because you've got units everywhere. Oh yeah, that's right. Oh guys, I'm sorry, I forgot all about those ships off the Canadian coast. I meant to move them over to. Man, that took forever for me to acclimate to.
And there's other stuff too, like in Tabletop Simulator, you hear voices of people talking. It's like, like in real life, you could kind of zone out people if they're over there. You could see maybe some hands in your peripherals and such. But in Tabletop Simulator, you hear everybody equally. And you hear them saying, oh, this battleship here can go over here. It's like, well, now I got to look over on that side of the map. And you have to scroll over there, see what's going on. It's like, okay, has no impact on me and go do your own thing, right? So in physical form board game, you actually get the game done quicker because you can plan your turn a little bit quicker and kind of peripherally see what everybody else is doing. In Tabletop Simulator, you kind of have to watch where the action is. And you also, there's more cheating involved. Like, I haven't been cheated against, but there's definitely the space for that. You're zoomed into like Europe. You don't know what that hand of the other player is doing over there. I mean, it's much more enjoyable here. And then there's like the physical element. Like, I don't even like regular video games that much. I used to be really into them. But if you play multiplayer with people online, it just doesn't do it for me. Even if they're friends, I enjoy playing around a table with a group of people, a group of friends, talking with them, visiting with them. The physical form, like people really underestimate that aspect of things. So
Mhm.
it's not like Tabletop Simulator is a fun thing to do. Okay, it is a fun thing to do, but it's the game that makes it fun. It's not the actual Tabletop Simulator that was like, oh, this is all I needed to make this game amazing. Not at all,
Yep.
right? So
Yep. That's a
that's
great
one
point.
thing I would say about it. And the other part about it too is I think other designers are getting this. Like the Kickstarter people who are kickstarting their own games, they're getting it. You know, I've played some games like, this is a brilliant, fantastic game. Can we please get this out there? They're like, well, no, the Kickstarter wasn't didn't look too promising, so we're gonna put it off for 3 or 4 years and maybe tackle it again. You can still access their game on Tabletop Simulator for free. A brilliant game that never made it to the public market. It's like all these hidden gems just couldn't get off the ground because not enough funding, right? So it's like this is a perfect thing to get people interested and invested into something, and a kind of a groundswell of publicity that gets people into the game. Like YouTube has done wonders for HBG in my opinion, and I think, you know, just because people share videos of things they do in strategy. Last point I wanted to make is Larry Harris, like the grandfather of Axis and Allies basically. So he's coming out with the War Room. He's coming out with War Room version 2. He actually allows you to, if you buy into the game, portion of what you pay goes into the designers of what Tabletop Simulator, into the Tabletop Simulator version of the game. Like he
I know
thinks of
that.
it, yeah, he's so confident in its ability to be beneficial to society or beneficial to his company that he just gives them money to like that. He says every $5 out of every purchase goes to the Tabletop Simulator guys. That's brilliant for me. I love that.
Actually, there's a one point I want to make with that. So obviously, everybody watching this probably has heard of that fantasy show. What's it called? Game of Thrones.
Mm.
Is that it? Yeah, Game of
Yep.
Thrones. You might have heard of it. Uh, on HBO, and for like 3 years straight, it was like
Yeah.
somebody asked an HBO executive in an interview. They asked him, okay, so for the last year, third year in a row, Game of Thrones is the most pirated show in the world.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? And his response was, well, it just tells us we're doing something right,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I'm not
Yeah.
worried about it. We
Yeah.
will we will make our money.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that is a cue to keep doing what we're doing
Hmm.
and give people what they
We're
want.
doing it
Now, of
right. Yeah.
course, that all fell apart in the last season. We all know,
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
infamously.
Yeah.
But anyway, I really like that story.
Yeah.
I mean, it shows, look, we're doing something right, and we
Mm.
are having an impact on, we are having a last, and Game of Thrones will have a lasting impact on the television development landscape
Yeah. Oh yeah.
for decades
Yeah.
at least. I have
What
no
to
doubt
do, what not to do,
what to
right?
do, what not to do. Yeah. But for various reasons, and HBO became so confident that we know we're putting out a good product. We understand the pitfalls of pirating, real pirating,
Mm.
not just sharing stuff with fair use, but real
Mm.
pirating.
Mm.
But we're not going to get hung up on that,
Mm.
because at the end of the day, we will still be very successful with
Mm.
this.
Mm.
We'll be
Mm.
wildly successful with this
Mm.
overall.
Yeah. I know
And
there's
I really
several.
respect that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's several movies. I know some of the werewolf. Not werewolf. You like superhero movies? What's the main guy called? Werewolf? Like that in the Hugh Jackman. Is that his superhero name?
Wolverine.
Wolverine. There we go.
Okay, clearly not a Marvel guy.
No.
We have learned
No.
something about Jinx today.
Yeah, not a Marvel guy.
Not a Marvel guy.
Okay, but I've heard like so. There's actually a theory because there were pirated versions of some of the Wolverine movies gone out beforehand that it's actually a tactic to drum up more interest. Because what they do is they release it, and some of the quality's not so good. A lot of the CGI is really unfinished and such too. You release it, you drum up some support, and people are like, "Oh, I watched the pirated version," and then they go to the theater and like, "Oh, it was even better, right?" And yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
yeah,
Honestly, that's a fair tactic. And
yeah,
some of these, and I honestly think some of the leaks that happen on Marvel sets are
Yeah.
deliberate,
I think so.
or
Yeah.
they understand that they're going to happen
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
ready to spin it once
Yeah.
it does happen. They may not do it
Sure.
deliberately.
Sure.
It's like we know some stuff's going to leak. We have our PR team ready to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
and kind of start spinning things and obfuscating things. And
But
there are
maybe.
certain things they don't want out there.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
certain things they don't mind being
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah. But
So yeah.
maybe they're like leaks are inevitable because the pressure kind of builds up with the excitement of the interior
Oh yeah,
excitement
yeah.
of the game. So let's have a controlled leak of whatever we want, and that way, kind of like things kind of calm down a little bit on the set or whatever. Like some of the people that are like, oh, maybe I should leak this to just let the public know what's going to go on. And yeah, I mean, maybe it's a controlled leak orchestrated by the producers or whatever you want to call it.
Oh,
Right?
I think in a lot of cases it is.
It is that. Yeah.
I think
Okay.
it a lot. Now, I'm sure not all. Like again, I'm sure not all the time.
No. No.
I'm sure there are some that are deliberate or mostly deliberate.
But the
Deliberate
good
enough where it's
quality,
like,
the
hey,
good
this,
quality leaks.
yeah, this is about to, yeah, we're good.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah,
good.
yeah,
We
yeah.
think this will be good in the long run.
Sure, sure.
But again, I think more than likely, okay, some stuff's going to get out there,
Mm,
and they have their PR team ready to hand
mm,
the
mm.
answer cards to
Yeah,
the actors
that's
in the
right. Yeah,
next interview. Okay,
that's
well
right.
this scene leaked, so here's how you're going to respond to
Mm,
this. They are very tightly controlled
oh
in how
yeah,
they
oh yeah,
respond.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Very tightly controlled in how they respond.
yeah.
Uh, eerily so.
Yeah.
Eerily so. Yeah.
Yeah. But it does have
Um,
lots of benefits to the company. So back
oh
to
yeah.
board games,
Yeah.
I think it's huge in this one. I think not that you're leaking anything, but say if you make it accessible on Tabletop Simulator and actually throw those guys a bone and help them out a little bit so they're invested into making a decent game. Now you've gone from your playtesting group of, say, how many playtesters do you think? 5 playtesters in 2 sessions of games? You release it out there before a game comes up. Suddenly you have, who knows how many playtesters playing who knows how many games, asking who knows how many questions from who knows how many backgrounds, right? Like you're playtesting the rule book, you're proofreading the rule book, you're also developing the game in a way that the people seem to enjoy because there's also personality difference. I'm not very conscientious of a person. You might be a bit more. Other people might like different things. We all know that certain YouTubers, they like more of the miniatures. Other people like more of the rule aspect of things. Now, maybe the guys who get into designing are a certain personality type that when they read the rules, it seems to make sense because they're somewhat similar of a mindset. But if you release it out to the public, you're playtesting it across a bunch of people, bunch of personalities, bunch of linguistical backgrounds as well too, so that they get all figured out. Like one of the issues I have with HBG Rulebook is I learned Czech as my first language growing up. And I find that I stumble on certain words and certain ways I read stuff, and my interpretation is sometimes different than the rulebook is. And so, I don't know. Playtesting stuff is always beneficial, I think.
Well, yeah, and that brings up an important point about playtesting and proofreading. And as somebody who would sometimes write up to 6 reports in a single
Oh, yeah.
day,
Yeah. Mm.
depending on what things were going on, and not little paragraph reports, we're talking multiple page reports about complex incidents. I had to develop ways of dealing with that. And one of the ways is you just pass it off to, hey, you got a couple minutes to read this because it's a really complex thing. I want to make sure it makes sense. You go to while he's reading it or she's reading it, you walk away. You go get a Coke. You go chill out. You just ignore it for 5 minutes. Come back and then listen to what they say. Because now in that instance, it's very important to make your reports clear and concise because you're going to have to testify to this stuff in court at some point. And you don't want to look like an idiot.
That's right.
Well, you don't quite have that same pressure in possible court hearing when it comes to rules. However, at the same token, you don't want to anger the fans by making ambiguous rules. And if somebody reads the rules and says, "Hey, this doesn't make sense," there's a reason it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You need to reword it. You need to rethink.
And don't just explain it to them while they're there. If they send you an email saying, "I don't understand this. Could you clarify this?" Be like, "Yeah, this is what it says." Take whatever you say and put it in the rulebook or in the errata or the FAQ or something like that. And I know people do this already, but make it more accessible to people too, so that it's not just like, "Well, that's a person with a weird background and he's a bit, he must have been a little stoned when he read the rulebook because it's clearly evident this way." Like, have a little faith that people have some, common sense and
I did a video specifically about this topic on my channel where it was kind of like my two
yeah,
biggest problems
yeah,
with rules designs and
yeah,
dealing with board game designers
yeah,
and trying to interpret rules which shouldn't be a thing,
mm,
and assuming players know something
mm,
when you shouldn't be assuming that they know something.
mm,
I did
mm,
a whole video on that particular thing, and
yeah,
it's kind of touching on what I'm already saying.
yeah,
But yeah, yeah, and that's I did, like, for example, I wish I could play before it got released 2025, Global War
right, yeah,
2025.
yeah,
I am looking forward to it. I may not be able to buy it right away, but I've read the rules. I didn't see any glaring problems, but until you sit down and start moving pieces around, some of the problems may not show up.
yeah, yeah,
So I really wanted to kind of, but I obviously I didn't have the map, I didn't have the pieces,
mm-hmm,
or I probably had, I could use stand-ins, but I didn't have the
mm-hmm,
map, and that was the big thing.
mm-hmm,
But it would have been nice just in this case to really rip apart the rule book by
mm-hmm,
playing it, because you
mm-hmm,
can read a rule and okay, conceptually it makes sense until you get down there and it starts interacting with all the other things. Oh shit, this doesn't actually make sense, and I
yeah,
need a
yeah,
clarification on this.
yeah,
So that's another benefit of posting your rules online and having a forum where players can come and play test for free and
mm-hmm,
build excitement, and you can
yeah,
fix problems, because it would be embarrassing for especially a big game. I mean, God, Cyberpunk 2077. I don't know if you're familiar with that
no,
game
no,
and the flop that it was when it came out. Real hyped up game, beautiful looking, and I love
mm,
cyberpunk as a genre. Man, this game was a disaster. And this was a
mm,
triple A game company that
mm,
needed to just fucking
yeah,
grab 100 people off the street,
sure, yeah, yeah,
average gamers, and say, please rip our game a new
yeah,
asshole.
yeah, yeah,
Rip it a
totally,
new asshole. Give us every problem you come across. Just
mm,
please. We'll house and feed you for 2 weeks while you just
sure,
play this thing to
yeah,
death. But I don't
yeah,
think they do that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
these companies end up with the entire carton of egg on their face
yeah, it's
when they
true,
do
it's
this.
true,
And
yeah,
this is a big major company.
yeah, and then
So
yeah, go
this,
on,
if they took this example that you see here with Tabletop Simulator and posting your rules online ahead of time, and they learned from that,
mm-hmm,
variations on that for the video game industry or computer game industry, I think you would see a lot less of that happen.
mm-hmm, 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 yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. So I think we could wind up with some things here, and I want to state too, just for the record, that this is just our opinions, whether they be valid or not, and we don't have all the facts either.
Oh
We
no,
don't
they're
have the
valid.
numbers.
This
Oh,
one they're
okay.
valid. Yeah, every other video we do is fine. This one they're valid. Yeah.
No, but what I mean is, like, we don't have all the facts in front of us too. We don't know the numbers and things. Like, there might be things behind things that we don't know, right? But from our perspective, sitting behind these tables, this is our opinion on this subject. We're not trying to throw anything too aside from Games Workshop. There's certain feelings we have there, but overall, I think, yeah, what do you have to say about it?
I think I already said it.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
fantastic. Yeah. No, I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't take this as harsh criticism. This is just two guys saying what we think is best. But at the end of the day, we don't have all the facts either. So we're trying to approach this to some degree. We have an opinion, but I want to say that I'm trying to be humble about my opinion, and I know I don't have all the facts.
Let me throw this out there. I want to change my opinion about Games Workshop.
Sure, yeah.
I am upset that I am this upset at Games Workshop.
Yeah.
I am. They have a lot of good things about them and their product that is worth looking into as a gamer, as somebody who's a fan of science fiction. There's aspects of their company and their overall world and products that I will sit here and tell you, go read. Some of those novelizations are amazing. Amazing reads.
Oh yeah, yeah. People love the
Non-science
game.
fiction
Yeah,
people I've
yeah.
loaned the whole first 3 Horus Heresy books to, and they've come back and said, these were good books, dude.
Yeah.
This isn't what I would ever normally read. These were good books. I want to like the company because I do like their product. So I want to change my opinion. I want to come back with a different opinion. I want to be more upbeat, but I'm not going to be. I'm not going to be a shill at the same time.
Yeah.
If I see a problem, it's a problem. It's a problem. I'm sorry. It
Yeah,
is what it
that's right.
is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it is still just my opinion at the end of the day. And I know there are people who will disagree with me. They're wrong, but
Mm.
they're there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right on. Okay. Well, fantastic talking with you again. We'll do
Okay,
this
so I
again
guess
soon,
we'll go
though.
ahead and wrap up this week. We don't know what we're going to talk about next week. We're trying to
Mm,
get a queue of videos kind of made up so we can kind of
mm,
just, maybe we can kind of put out a teaser in the middle of the week or something and kind of go from
mm.
there. But,
Yep,
we'll
yep.
just kind of play it as it comes. So other than
Okay.
that, this is going to be, we're going to mute, signing off.
Okay. Talk to you later. Cheers.
Werewolf. Oh, God.